Welcome to Beyond the Picket Fence, where we talk about the American dreams and the untold stories. And I have an amazing guest today that is here that I cannot wait to share with you. Her name is Beverly Biehl, and she's going to tell us all about the world of Feng Shui. So I'm super excited. And we probably have something a little common in common too. And I'll ask her about that as we go along. But Beverly, tell us a little bit about how did you get started in being a feng shui expert? Because you definitely have all of the qualifications and taken your time to study this beyond just opening a book.
Well, thank you so much, Missy, for having me here, and Max as well. I really appreciate having the opportunity to participate in this amazing podcast. You've had some incredible guests prior to me, so I'm happy to be a part of them. Um, I apparently, so this is the funny story. Apparently, when I was in high school, one of my classmates remembered that I had checked a book out on feng shui from the local library. And again, you got to remember, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Kansas. There were 15 people in my high school graduating class, so it's not exactly like this was common knowledge. But I didn't remember that. Reminded me at a class reunion after I had already started taking a lot of these classes. But what really started me down this journey was a friend gave me a book on feng shui after I had finished with all of my breast cancer treatments. I had a diagnosis at 36. This was in 2002, so I've just given people the opportunity to guess to calculate my age, which is fine. And the fact that I'm still here after 22 years being cancer free, I think between all the alternative treatments that I utilized, as well as feng shui, which I think really made a big difference on how I could find all of the resources that I needed to keep myself healthy. It really was that start of a book of the idea, the concept of your house could actually help heal you, or it could be making you sick. In my case, I think it was just being so incredibly energetically sensitive, as well as having a little bit of an environmental sledgehammer that came in and
Yeah.
made life a little bit challenging. We'd had a fire. It wasn't not nothing, no big fire damage, no water damage, thankfully, but some candles burned, some plastic little floral rings that I'd had up for Christmas, and I forgot to blow them out before we left the house, and so I will never light a taper in my house again. Um, but that started the petrochemical soot issue. There was a ton of that. There was all new carpet, all new hardwoods, all new paint, all the dry cleaning that had to be done in order to get
Yeah.
all the stuffed animals and the toys and everything smoke free. And um, I didn't know how big of an impact that was going to have on my physical body. So um, I I believe it's a combination of how environment or energetically sensitive I was, combined with just this environmental toxic overload. And we had just recently moved. This was not terribly long after 9/11. You just all kinds of issues that just kind of all coalesced, and there you go. That's how my brain can rationalize that experience.
Mhm.
Um, but the gift in that big pile of poop was a really nice pony. Uh, because if there's a big pile of excrement somewhere, there's some kind of a nice animal around that left it. And in my case, it was learning how to read the energy of both spaces and people and even objects, because everything stores energy. It's like a thumbprint. We where some people may walk into a space and they may not necessarily feel as comfortable what's going on. I've learned how to read the fingerprint smudges that are left over from other folks. In fact, I had a client in the Dallas area who was looking for new space. They were looking at expanding their footprint, for their in-person offices. And so the owner had me check out a couple of different locations, and I just drove up to the entrance of one of them. I kind of felt like, oh, there's something off here. So I did a tiny bit of research. The previous two businesses that had been in that location both went bankrupt. And so I advised my client that you don't want that location. I could probably energetically work with or work around that, but it's like, why would you want to try to run a marathon with a boot? Like an orthopedic boot on. So it turns out it was a very good decision because that was in 2019, and we all know what happened in 2020. Nobody was going to that office.
No, that's an amazing story to a start. And I knew I liked you for a couple of reasons. I'm from Illinois, so we both have Midwest backgrounds,
Okay.
both small towns.
Okay.
And we've both had breast cancer. So, and you were
Ah,
very young when you've had yours.
I
So,
did. Yeah.
yes, and we definitely in that process have our immune system compromised. So this can not only help, and I never thought about that before when we talk about positive energy and everything else in a space. But I mean, this really covers a whole gamut of not just the real estate for real estate purposes. This can cover divorce.
Mhm.
And you said something that was very important. I once listed a house that they were going through a divorce, and the previous owners had been through a divorce, and the previous owners before that
Yeah.
had been through a divorce. So I wonder where the consequences are or the coincidences are from all of those things. So you had breast cancer and you had a lot of changes happen at once. You had the fire, all of these things, and you started the business. Why?
When I began to just flip through the pages of this little simple book, it was called Move Your Stuff, Change Your Life. Karen Rausch Carter is the author. She practices a more simplified, westernized version of Feng Shui. I have now transitioned over to the more classical, more well, like the original type of Chinese Feng Shui because again, personal experiences showed me that this was there are great applications for it, but it is not addressing a lot of the very specifics that many of my clients were still being challenged with. Um, so why did I start it for other people? I'm a giver. I love connecting people, and my entire life I would joke that I had paper towels on my shoulders because people would come to me and they'd cry on my shoulder and they'd leave feeling fantastic and I'd leave feeling like I hit by a truck for the next several days because I would now be feeling all of their sadness or all of their rage and it would take a while for me to kind of move through that. Um, when I used these techniques with feng shui in my home just from this book, I did it for, I wanted my husband to get a raise. So I zhuzhed up the wealth corner, at least what I thought was the wealth corner. Um, and within a couple of days, he had a couple people out of the blue call him up with job opportunities. I mean, he hadn't spoken to these folks in over a year. And okay, well, sure, let's look at this. And then there was another little piece in the book about how to stop people from arguing. And, I had a 5 and a 7-year-old at this time. Okay, so they were maybe 6 and 8 at that point.
Arguing is part of it.
Oh yeah, but it was just constant. And so the suggestion was take the pictures, they put them face to face, and then wrap it 9 times with a red string, and then put it in what they considered to be the relationship corner. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. My kids got along fantastically for 2 solid weeks. It was a
Epic.
miracle. It was epic, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the final piece, the one that really convinced me was, it's like my husband was having a hard time deciding about, this opportunity or that opportunity. One would require a move, the other would require him to go into the office because he had been a remote worker before being a remote worker was cool. Um, And so I was like, what, how can we figure out how to help make decisions? Oh, hanging a mirror in the entryway. I know, we'll do that. We did that on a Sunday morning. He gets a call from his boss the next day saying, you know, we were talking about you, off and on all weekend, and we've got this other project that we want to do. And would you be interested in taking over this training and teaching thing that we need to have done? Which is my husband's dream. He loves doing that. He loves teaching classes. He loves creating courses. Um, and so it wasn't more money, but the job satisfaction went through the roof. And that's when I thought, okay, if I can do this by just reading a book, imagine if I actually had real knowledge. And that's when I started taking courses. Um, I've now studied with like 9 or so different teachers, masters, etc. Um, and because it made such a difference in my life, I knew that it couldn't just stay within me. I needed to share it. I needed to help others just be able to get a different perspective about their space. I don't know about you, but I'm sure that you have some items in your home right now that have very special meaning to you. They don't have meaning to anybody else. But if I were to tell you that everything in your home could have that same special meaning, wouldn't that be of interest to you?
I would say yes.
Yeah. And especially like when you're talking about selling a home. Um, I actually held a real estate license for a while when we lived in the Frisco, Texas area, and used feng shui techniques to stage homes in order to help the buyers find them better. And what happened in many cases was after I went through and I arranged things without really having a lot of contact with the buyer, we found out very quickly which buyers were still way too attached to their homes to let it sell, and which ones were like, "Yep, done, get it out of here." And that is something too that, especially for realtors, assessing just how serious are these people at letting this home go.
So let's talk about what the definition of feng shui actually is.
Okay. So feng shui is a philosophy that originated in China about 5 or 6,000 years ago. It translates to wind and water, which is why you look at the tangible way the energy moves, which is the water, because you want the energy in your space to flow like a gently meandering stream. That's the healthiest environment for the animals that live in that stream. Um, you also want to have a nice, gentle, cool breeze or warm breeze, depending on the time of the year. And that's the intangible, the way the wind is blowing. You can't see the wind, but you can feel the effects of the wind. So when you spoke of walking into a space and feeling like something is off, even though it might be beautiful, model homes are a great example of you can walk in and you're like, okay, it's very pretty, and we're going to have museum hands and not touch anything. That's that constrictive energy of too perfect of a space. Sometimes you don't need that. That's also why you can walk into a home that, from a visual aspect, may look kind of cluttered and messy and just chaotic, but it feels so warm and homey and inviting. It's less about everything being perfect and minimal. It is or even a certain decorating style. It has everything to do with the energy that is being put into the space, and especially if you can place those items in there with intention based upon what they call the Bagua map. That just translates to 9 sectors. So in the original style of feng shui that I learned, everything was oriented one way and one way only. After 14 years of practicing that way, I had to retrain myself because, again, I practice always on myself first. And that cookie cutter feng shui way wasn't working effectively for me or for my family. And so when I added directions in, um, it's like it aligned everything with the planet's energy. And I know this sounds very woo-woo. I've had to embrace that because I mean I worked for Procter and Gamble for 7 years. I have a very logical, analytical brain, and it was a quite a leap for me to move into this. Wait a minute, there's this energy stuff that's flowing around, and I don't know until I embraced it and I really experienced it. Um, you get over that feeling right pretty quickly.
There's not a math equation for that?
There probably is, but I haven't found it. But with feng shui, with the 9 sectors, each of these sectors corresponds with a different element of our lives, a different aspect. So in the north, we have our career and life path sector. In the northeast is the skills and relationship sector. Remember that one. I'm going to come back to that one. The east is all about family and ancestors, like family of origin, but also what kind of a legacy are you trying to leave? What is that meaning, especially for a business? What is it that who came before you and how did you get here? The southeast is the wealth and abundance sector, like long-term wealth. What are your aspirations? This is the one that I look at to find out if people are afraid of money. Because if they've got money challenges, often this is the sector that ends up getting very cluttered, or they store their broken things in it. So we can work through that. The South is the fame and reputation sector. It's like for sales. If you want to get a promotion, that's the sector that you want to focus on. It's a fire element, so that's a great spot to have like a red pillow or a candle. Always make sure you blow those out, though, before you leave the house. The Southwest sector is the relationships and partnerships. It also is like business partnerships. So if you're struggling with maybe a supplier, look at what you've got going on there. Or if somebody's having a challenge with a relationship, if they're wanting to bring one in, make sure that you don't have just a bunch of images of single people in your home, because you're going to stay alone and as long as you have just single objects or imagery around. The West is children and creativity and creative problem solving for those who are just in a conundrum about, well, how do I move forward with what's my next step? Sit in the West, let yourself relax and do some meditation or do some journal writing in that, because your brain will automatically tune into that creative problem solving energy and you'll come up with your solution. The Northwest is the helpful people and travel sector. So if you need mentors to guide you, if you need assistance in maybe finding the right person to connect with, that's a good spot to like focus on to make sure that it's uncluttered. And then the very center is the health sector. If you think about this Bagua map as if it were a wheel, if one of this, like a bicycle tire, if one of the spokes breaks, yeah, you're not going to be going real far, but you can still kind of limp along. But if that hub breaks, if the center part breaks, like we talked about earlier when we were having our cancer experiences, when your health is not working, nothing works. And so for me, everything that I do is really all about maximizing your health, whether it's financial health, physical health, mental health, emotional health, or energetic health, even relational health. So all of that really factors into what I do. Because, you and I have both experienced that little cosmic 2x4 and said, okay, guess what? You get to learn something new. And I said, I did not want to learn that class. I did not want to take that particular PhD course in human psychology, but here I am.
So, out of curiosity, because I've dealt a lot with this in real estate and people looking at homes and people asking for what direction the house is. It's primarily been Asian cultures. Why is that? Can you give me what exactly they're looking for and why they're asking those questions?
Yes. In Chinese astrology, they call it Bazi, Bazi. Once you plug your birth date and time of birth into a calculator. You can find them online. There's plenty of them for free. It will give you a qua number. This is like your life star number. So for me, for example, my qua number is 7. 7 is the number that corresponds to the west direction. In my ideal world, I probably would have had a home that faces west. However, I have one that faces east, but the west view is spectacular. Um, and I think my husband's, anyway, each of those sectors corresponds or has one of the 5 elements associated with it. And ideally, you want to have your home, the energy of that one of those 5 elements line up with one of your qua numbers, whatever that life star number is. The east direction is a very popular direction because of the sun rising to the east and then setting in the west, and so that brings more of that energy in. You don't have to match everything up with your life path. A lot of times, it really depends on the landforms that are surrounding the space. Those also have a lot to do with the overall energetic health of the home. If you find, though, that you're dealing with a lot of Indian families or, from that area, if they're practicing a philosophy called Vastu Shastra, they have a completely different or a similar set of guidelines for them. And a lot of this has to do with the geography of where these philosophies came from, because in India, the south is super hot. You don't want anything that's just too hot. The north is preferable. And so culturally, northern-facing homes for Indians are preferred. East-facing homes are second. For the Chinese, the north, it's too far. It's too cold. So no, we don't want a north-facing house. Culturally, they'd prefer something more southern-facing home. And so if you think about it that way, there's a lot of cultural stuff that goes along with this as part of that tradition. But here in San Antonio and the Texas area and Austin, I find that it is easiest to look at making sure that the home is surrounded is surrounded by good energy, that there's an easy flow of traffic around there, and that they're not going to be having any of the feng shui no-nos, which you don't want to be at a T intersection. Personally, the energy in a cul-de-sac isn't optimal either because of how slow the energy goes in there. Think about a stream when it kind of goes in this little eddy, and sometimes sometimes like leaves and stuff get stuck there and it gets a little mossy green. The same thing is happening in cul-de-sacs. It is a great place if you've got little kids and you want to make sure that they're not going to get run over.
Right.
But as a general rule, if I were to move into a new environment, I would not move into a cul-de-sac because we don't have kids anymore. But that is something to consider, because that then would be considered a temporary home for a few years, and then you'd move out and head to your next one. But does that answer your question?
Yes. What I think is also fascinating in listening to what you're saying is you said there are some no's.
Yes.
So tell me about those no's.
So the feng shui nose is ideally, your home is not below street level, because if you think about what rolls downhill, you don't want to be the receptacle of that stuff rolling down the hill. So, what I'm talking about is like on a hillside where there's the streets right here, and then you really have to go down quite a ways before you can get into the garage. In fact, I had a client. They were so excited about their new home, and they moved in, and the first thing I saw is, oh dear, the way the energy comes straight down the driveway. It kind of had a little bit of a curve before you could get into the garage. But the way that the energy was flowing, it was flowing straight into their front door. And my first thought is, ooh, they better be careful. This could lead to a divorce. And sadly it did. But, sometimes people don't talk to me before they actually sign on the dotted line, and I can only then go backwards. The other no that I discourage is having stairs that go straight out the front door. There's a difference though, because if there's at least a couple of like 5 feet between the end of the stair and the front door, that's easier to work around than if it's right there and in the landing. When my husband and I first moved to Austin, we were renting a home that had stairs that just came right down, and there was just a tiny landing between the end of the stairs and the front door. And again, we didn't buy it. We were just there temporarily, but it felt uncomfortable every time I walked in that door because it's like you get slammed with this energy. Stairs act like waterfall. And so if you're standing right in front of a waterfall, for the first little bit, it's kind of like, okay, this is fine. But then after a while, it's like, okay, this is enough. I'm tired of the fire hose on me. The other no is if they're on the, like behind the home, if there's like a big drop off that doesn't have a fence, sometimes that's just a kind of a common sense thing these days. Talking about erosion, you want to be cautious about some of those things. That's just common sense. And for people who are very sensitive, that they don't maybe understand just how energetically sensitive they are, those big high voltage power lines. I know that there's always people say, no, there's not a problem with that. All I know is where I was in Frisco, at the time, there were 3 others of us that were all experiencing breast cancer at the exact same time. We lived in the same area. We'd been there about the same amount of time. And there was one of these high voltage power lines not too far away. And there were several rare, air quotes, cases of a very specific type of brain cancer. So that's something that I would simply be aware of. I wouldn't let it freak you out, but it is, if you are one of these people who's is a very strong empath or something, I would look at that and think twice before I would move in there, especially if it's a long-term place that you want to be. But those would be my big no's.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I agree. I get a lot of comments about energy that comes from power lines, whatever anyone's belief is. But I have also, through the years of working with clients, know that people are more sensitive to it than others as well, by just working with them. Tell us about some common mistakes that people make and some quick fixes that they could do.
The biggest mistake that I made in my own home, before I understood that the direction made such a big difference. I had a south-facing home at the time, and and remember, I told you that the south is a fire element, or it has the fire element in there. The north hosts the water element. So in the westernized version of how you use that Bagua map, everything was one way, and so I was treating my front door as if it were the north side. I was treating it as if, okay, well, no, the door is always the career and life path, so it's a water element. So I painted my front door blue, and then I wondered why my efforts seemed to all go up in smoke or vaporize, or it just seemed like there was nonstop struggle there for a while until I contacted one of my friends who had gone to one of my classes with me, and she's like, I don't know why, but I know it's not from our training, but you need to paint your front door red. Your house told me. And my first thought was, my house is not talking to you, but this is weird. I'm desperate. I'll do it. I painted the front door red because, it's just paint. Oh my heavens, everything turned around. It was really freaky. But that was another one of those little cosmic nudges, the little like tap on the shoulders, like, see, I told you so. But the other mistake that a lot of people make is thinking that it doesn't matter if you leave the toilet seat up. or that you can ignore just little water leaks. It's not that big of a deal. But here's the thing. In Feng Shui, water and money are totally linked. And health too, because, if you're wasting water, you're obviously not going to have that to consume. So when people leave when I learned this, I actually told my son, who was again a little boy at this time, that if you leave the toilet seat up, the money energy is going to fall in the toilet, and you're going to flush it away, and we're not going to have any money for your allowance. And boy, that toilet seat got put down right away. But again, if you do find that you're having a lot of water leaks or like a lot of money, just kind of all these little repairs or, just little niggly things that just suddenly start costing you a lot of money, the first thing to do is make sure there are no water leaks anywhere. Toilets are the first place to look, but sometimes it could be just a simple little gasket, just like this little teeny drip, 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 and your pocketbook will thank you.
That's pretty cool. I like the reason on why I like toilet seats down, and now I have a proof.
Absolutely.
I have another reason why they need to be down, so I love it. Well, tell me a little bit about the myths and the misconceptions that we typically see with Feng Shui. I know I've experienced a lot of it hearing people talk over the years.
The first myth is that, or I don't know if it's a myth or a misconception, I think it's a little bit of both, is that Feng Shui is a religion. And that, but I'm a good Christian. I'm a good Muslim. I'm a good Hindu. I can't do Feng Shui. It's just a philosophy. It's simply a way of it's like a language. It's something that you can use as an overlay over your space, as an mental organizational pattern. Yes, there are a lot of little tchotchkes that a lot of stores will love to sell you. Many times you'll see these little like dogs, with the big open mouths, the food dogs at the front of Chinese restaurants. The concept is that they're the protectors. They're going to scare away any of the negative energy that's coming in.
Kind of like gargoyles.
Yes, exactly. If you like them, go ahead and buy them. I found some really cool. They look like wooden. They look like trees. They're clearly not from trees, but have been carved to look like knights. And so those are my version of my guardians, and they're a lot more aesthetically pleasing for me. I've given them the assignment to keep all of the negative energy out of my house. I think it's worked pretty well. I do not like to go into a place to see that they've got all of these, King Wen and all the crystals, like the round faceted crystals and this and all over the place. They've got little, there's the fish or there's the hopping frog with the little coin in its mouth. If that means something to you, by all means, go ahead and spend the money. I will help you figure out where to put it, to place it properly. I have experienced far greater results by taking what you already have and assigning it whatever that meaning that needs to be for this particular thing. I remember one teacher that was, this was the craziest thing. His suggestion for keeping negative energy away was to pound a large 4x4 into your yard and then hang a wok with the burnt side, hang that on this pole facing the street. And I'm like, and I paid money to come to this class? What? There's no way anybody is going to do that in this country. But here's another thing. You might have heard or seen pictures of certain big buildings in, I think Hong Kong is the one that was really doing this type of stuff. But there was two competing businesses and two competing skyscrapers, and they actually placed cannons pointing at the other building as a way to perform energetic warfare. And I've kept thinking, all right, that's a bit much. I again, from my own personal experience, yes, you can take some aggressive actions like that energetically. I personally have found that it tends to bounce right back off on you. And so if you're not careful, you'll end up creating a boomerang effect and tank your own business. So let's all work together. That's my mindset.
So what I hear here is that often people can take the basis, which is the 5 elements, and you used a phrase that I really liked on your website, and it was the energy alchemist. Love that phrase.
Yes.
And find balance with placement is what I'm understanding.
Yes.
And how energy flows through in that placement based on those 5 elements. And, it's very simple, but people can really mess it up with their own little intentions or additives.
So when you say they can mess it up, yes and no. You can't know what you don't know until you know it. And so a person might have the best of intentions to bring money in, and they could be doing all the right things in their space. And I say the right things, based on this Bagua map. But as I said earlier, if they believe that money is evil, or that you have to work really, really, really hard to be able to get just even the tiniest bit of money in, or that they are undeserving of comfort and abundance, it doesn't matter what they do. In either the wealth corner, which again I've said was the Southeast, that's their long-term wealth and abundance, and they may not even be able to recognize areas where they may already have the skills or the knowledge or the ability to bring in extra money now. That was that Northeast corner that I wanted to come back to, but that's part of the reason why I incorporated the transformational coaching, the energy work, the mindset shift, because I knew that when I was continuing on after I really had a good foundation of Feng Shui, I would still go into people's homes and absorb all of the energy. It's like I'm this big Swiffer sponge thing. Again, they'd feel great. I'd leave and I'd spend 3 days on the couch, and that's a bad business model. And so I had to, again, continue down that path of, well, what am I missing? And it was really augmenting the knowledge of that intangible, not just like the energy jelly fingerprints that are all over your space that I now know how to clean off, but it was that mental piece, that internalized pattern or belief that often will show up in the house. So these days, when I'm hired, not when I'm just visiting, I just want to make that clear. When I'm on the clock, I will analyze everything. If I'm not, nope, I'm not going there. But when I'm on the job, I can look at a person's home and I can assess almost immediately what part of their life is feeling out of balance. Again, one of my clients, she just was constantly feeling broke. And when I went to her office, this was, again, we were just focusing strictly on her office. I looked at that wealth corner, and she had her divorce papers stored there. She had a broken pot that was being stored there. There was a dead plant. I mean, she couldn't even get to it because she'd blocked it all off. And when I just raised her awareness about it, immediately something went off like, oh my gosh, I have been blocking my ability to receive money. I have been thinking that, it's that I can't bring in more than what I'm already bringing in. This was on a Friday. She cleaned up this whole spot, rearranged things according to the energy map that I gave her. And I think it was the Monday or Tuesday that week, she ended up getting a great position. Actually, it was in real estate. She was teaching other realtors some sales techniques. And she did that for, I think, probably 15 years. So, again, sometimes it takes a little bit more to get through to people, but a lot of times it's one or two simple little awareness or perspective shifts. And I think the most common thing that people say after working with me is, I never thought of it that way. That's part of that coincidence creator that I like to also use as part on my website.
I'm curious about there's the knowledge side and then the emotion side.
Yes.
How do people communicate with you how the changes make them feel?
Oh, well, they tell me. They immediately, I can, whether they're able to express it, you can see when somebody has relaxed in the presence of their own home. Their shoulders go down, their ears go up. You start to relax a little more. I've observed breathing patterns shift where they're no longer kind of, they're having that real almost not panting, but just that real shallow breathing. They can take a deeper breath. But I also do bring the physical feeling to their attention as well. So if I am working on a space where there's been a lot, like a divorce situation, sometimes as we're kind of readjusting things in the home, I'll ask, it's like, okay, well, how are you feeling about, I'm just going to use a coffee table as my example, because if you think about when you're broke and you see a coffee table on the side of the road and you don't have one and you're like, oh my gosh, this is such great luck. I got this free from my Buy Nothing group. How awesome. And if you then now go, fast forward 10 years later and that same coffee table is there and you've done nothing to it, it's now really wobbly and you're still telling yourself, oh, well, it was free, so I can't get rid of it. But, it doesn't look that good. That then tells me that, oh, you're still living in that broke space. You're still existing in a reality where you believe you are only worthy of a, falling apart coffee table, even though it was free. It's okay to go and maybe go to Goodwill and find one that's in better shape. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You could even just refinish it. And that then shifts the energy of that. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Kind
because
of?
I'm curious because there's some outcomes, right? Like you can see somebody
Mhm.
got a raise, the relationship's better. But I also know that there's like quick emotional benefits that people can tell right away.
Mhm.
And I'm also curious about the role of clutter in all of the Feng Shui world. Feng Shui world.
Clutter is the sign of stagnant energy, but not all clutter is the same. I, again, going to call myself out because I'm a visual person. And so when I'm working on stuff, I have piles spread all over my desk. And if you, depending on when you walked into my office, you'd be thinking, what does this crazy pants person think they know about Feng Shui? Because it's a disaster in here. But the piles are not the problem. It's the stagnation of the piles. If like I'll have several different things that I'm working on. They're staged as to how I'm working through it. But usually at the end of the day or maybe a week, it's all taken care of and done and dusted. If you have a pile that just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, then my question to my client is, we're going to take this slowly, but we're going to start with about the top third, You're going to take that and we're going to flip it over. And you're going to deal with whatever's on that now, the top of that pile, and see what emotions are you stuffing. And as they are address that, the rest of the pile just disappears. Again, personal experience. I had gotten so frustrated because I could not wrap my head around how to deal with this couple of piles that had just taken over. And I really thought it was just a matter of finding the right cute organizer bins.
Mhm.
And so I called a friend in who does organizing, and we started working through everything else. But there was this one pile that I kept avoiding. And she's like, okay, Bev, it's time. I don't know what's under there and what you're hiding from, but it's time. I'm here. Let's do this together. And so I did just that. I took the top half. That was super simple. It was just like, well, duh, let's just go through this, until I got to what was on the very bottom. And it was some really heavy decision-making stuff that had to do with my son and a friend's son and some other of their friends. And I just still, I mean, I think about it now and it makes me choke up to think that had been sitting there for, I kid you not, 3 years, because I had not been ready yet to deal with the emotions. There was so much tied in with this small little pile. And so I never get upset or mad or disappointed with any client who is having some problems with piles. That's a very emotional thing. If any of you have ever watched those shows, Hoarders, it's not a matter of organization for them. It's an emotional connection that is filling something that is missing inside of them. And so figuring out a way to fill that emotional well, that emptiness inside, once that is addressed, the piles will take care of themselves. And that's, again, when I notice that if things are starting to stack up on me, then it's time for me to take a little bit of my own personal inventory. So no, I don't want to ever have anybody feel shame about what their house looks like, because sometimes there's just too much going on. I mean, my house was never neat and clean when I had 2 kids because they had all kinds of stuff happening. And, if you travel, sometimes you just literally do not have time. It's like, do I sort the mail or do I sleep? I'm going to sleep.
So I think that's interesting, because what I heard in that is clutter is not, we often think of Feng Shui, and especially in dealing with selling homes and everything else, that you have to remove every piece of clutter there is. But it goes back to, then you said that you can cause, that sterile atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
and you take away energy from there. And I think what I've heard is it really is about the energy that the space is putting off. And if you have problems, where is that energy being blocked?
Right.
And there's where you need to address it. So Feng Shui looks at all of it. They look at your emotional energy, at your space energy, and then where is the problem at?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you need to address. It's not that you have to address every space in your house, or that you have to live like a museum. So that's pretty interesting, because many times when I've heard people talk about Feng Shui in the past, it is about, let's make the house a museum, and you didn't buy the house facing the right way, and your door color's not the right color. And that's usually the basis, instead of understanding all the interweaving parts and the connection
Right.
that I'm hearing you talk about.
Yes. So you use the word problem. There are areas that can be problematic.
Hmm.
Um, I keep coming back to this idea that in the Chinese character for chaos and is almost identical to the Chinese character for opportunity.
Hmm.
So I will often use opportunity areas rather than problem areas
I like that.
because it's a little bit more of a positive reframe. And I think people are more willing to put effort into creating opportunity than they are taking effort and putting it into fixing a problem.
Completely agree.
And so when if there's something that can be done to create this a better opportunity out of whatever is currently being perceived as a problem, then yeah, absolutely, let's look at that. Obviously, having spent time as a realtor, having worked with people to stage their home with their existing stuff, you want to be able to eliminate as much of your personalized stuff. You take away the family pictures, reduce the books by at least half to, look at your artwork. How, is it can it be too off-putting? You do really want to neutralize your space when you're trying to sell because, again, that has two benefits. Number one, you cease to seeing your home as your home. It's just the house that you're inhabiting until it's, you're caretaking that for the next person. But then the potential buyers are coming through. And if it's more neutralized, both with the visuals, but also with the energy, they can start to see themselves into this space a little bit easier. So, yeah, that's one of the things that. Here's a great story. Talk about helping people sell their homes. I had a referral from a longtime client, um, and this couple, they have multiple properties and they've been slowly downsizing. And they had a $9 million home in California. Well, obviously, I couldn't fly out to California at the drop of a hat to go and feng shui this home. So I looked at the video and I was like, okay, well, here's the emotion that I'm feeling in this property. Um, do you have a floor plan? They immediately produced the floor plan. And again, this is not a couple that is used to any kind of woo-woo stuff. And it's like, well, you've tried a lot of other things. Let's try this. And this is when I broke out the essential oils that I use when I'm doing space clearing. So somewhere along the way, I think it's probably 2010, a friend of mine introduced me to this concept of it called a fire cleanse. I take a little bowl or take a little piece of aluminum foil and I make a bowl. I add a little bit of Epsom salts and then I'll take rubbing alcohol, like 90, it has to be 91%, otherwise it won't burn. And then I have 170 some different essential oils that I haul around in a little suitcase. Um, and I will energy test to see which of these essential oils, what frequency of because all the essential oils, everything has a different frequency. I will energetically put my energy into the room on this floor plan. I figured out the combination of essential oils. I would put it into this little bowl with the Epsom salts. And then I would light it on fire with the intention that it would shift the energy in that space. Because this is the cool thing. Energy doesn't know, it doesn't care if you're 1,000 miles away. It connects with you instantly. And I've done this a couple of times before, but I have to say this was probably the quickest result that we had. So this was on a Tuesday. They sent me an email on, I asked them how was everything going the following week because, I want to be respectful. It's like, well, this is really, really great timing because we just got a full price cash offer on it on Friday. And while I was there working on this other property, he also was a realtor. There was another property that also had been sitting. Okay, I take that back. The property that had been sitting in Dallas, that was the one that was the cash offer. The $9 million property, though, had a quick close. So they were going to be closing by the end of, they said it by the end of October. And so that's part of that intangible piece that I never quite understood how powerful it was until I began experimenting with this fire cleanse and the essential oils. It is turning out to be one of my personal biggest revenue streams, because when they're having that, I don't know if I'm going to get divorced or not energy, let's neutralize the energy of the space using this variety of essential oils. Um, People will use sage to burn to
Right.
try to
Mhm.
clear the energy, and that's great. But if you think about it, that is just one frequency. And if your culture, if there's not really a real strong cultural attachment to that, it may not be as effective. People have also used Palo Santo. They will use sweetgrass. I know a lot of people will go through with a singing bowl. The sound is another intangible way of shifting the energy of a space. That's why the music you're listening to has a really big impact on you. I just have found this particular modality to be the most powerful and thorough of anything else that I've tried. So when you're talking about the space, so many factors show up. In fact, I'll go ahead and give you, I've got a little sample here for you. I'm going to give you, this is my
Oh,
joy
you're so
water. Here you
sweet.
go.
This
Thank
is
you.
awesome.
So this was my first foray into using essential oils as a space clearing tool. About 16 years ago or so, maybe 17 by now, I was working at a magazine in the Dallas area. I happened to be the fourth person in 6 months sitting in that cubicle. Me, being the energetically sensitive empath that I am, sat down in that chair and immediately felt dizzy. There had been a vortex of this, oh, this is terrible kind of thing going on there. And I'm like, okay, I'm in a new job. I'm not going to stay in this new job very long until I come up with something to fix this. And I really can't come through here and burn sage or anything else. So I went to a friend's home who had the entire collection of the Young Living essential oils.
Mhm.
And again, I'm an oil agnostic. Yes, I love Young Living. I like it, but I found I will take whatever oil has the right vibe for me. But I created this blend, and it's been the ideal solution for so many people for so many years. What it does is it neutralizes the energy of a space. Then it purifies it and re-energizes it with joy. And when you spray this, it's like your whole being just says, ah. It's perfect for when you're traveling, when you're in a hotel room, because you don't know what kind of funk has been in there, or Airbnbs. You really don't know what kind of funk has been in there. It's great if to have in the car for helping to decrease road rage. It's also, because it's a small enough bottle, you can carry that on to airplanes. So it's a very good travel buddy. So
And it
anyway,
smells amazing.
it's
It
good,
does.
huh?
It's very, very fresh.
Yeah.
And it's really and it has some spice to it. And but it's nothing overwhelming. It's very effervescent.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the name of it. Joy water. That's fantastic.
I wasn't exactly being super creative when I first put it together, but again, the intention wasn't necessarily to sell it. I was desperate. I needed something for me because it was not exactly the optimal employment circumstance, but I made it 10 months, and I was really proud of myself considering the other people had only made it maybe a few weeks. So I credit Joy Water with that.
So Beverly, tell us how someone just on their own, what are some tips on their own how they may read energy?
So that's a really big question because everybody will be able to pick up on energy in several different ways. There's clairvoyance, where you can so some people can actually see auras, and they'll may see like a shimmer in the corner. That's not necessarily my skill set, but that does work for some people.
Mm-hmm.
The second is clairaudient, where they may actually hear like a crackle or something. Not necessarily hear voices, but they may like suddenly just, it almost feels like somebody is saying, look over here, that kind of a thing. There's clairgnosis, where you just know. And there's another clair. Usually, I think there's like 4 of them. For me personally, because I do tend to be a big skeptic, I found that my physical body is the one that will tell me
Mm-hmm.
if something is good or not for me. Um, there's something that's called the sway test, where you're standing up, and if you're like especially, I've seen a lot of people in the grocery store in the supplement section. They'll pick up a supplement that they've been recommended, and they can hold it next to their chest. And if it's positive for them, their body will slightly move forward as in like a yes. If it's not good for them, they'll lean back. So that's one way of doing that. There are also several different like energy testing ways. Many people have heard of the applied kinesiology, where you'll have someone else, you put your arm straight out, and somebody will push down on it for more of the yes-no answer. That's great if you've got somebody there with you. But if you're by yourself, there's like this O-ring technique, where you have one hand is the control. I usually use like the thumb and the middle finger. And then on the other hand, you'll have that be the tester. And so you'll try to pull them apart. If it's strong, that usually means that's your yes. If it's weak, that's going to be your no. It'll pull right through. And so people can kind of experiment with that. I think the biggest thing is for people to suspend their disbelief. Because it is not commonly accepted right now as a skill set. It's like, well, you're just a weirdo. No, I just happen to have a little bit more imagination, and that's okay. So I hope that helps. But again, if somebody, it's that gut reaction. And I also know that when people have a gut reaction to something, sometimes it is really, oh no, girl, you're in danger, run. But sometimes it could also be the residue of a trauma that they had, or a bad experience that they had in childhood. And so their experience is, oh no, this person actually is being nice to me. They clearly must want to hurt me, because maybe they had a childhood experience where someone was really nice to them, and then, betrayed that trust somehow. And so that's when therapy is needed.
Right.
That's
right.
when, and so trust those cues, but try to take a breath. And before you make that snap decision, take the breath and internally ask, is this from a past experience, or is this really the right decision now?
Great. Let me ask you another question if I
Okay.
can. So, can Feng Shui influence love, health, wealth? And I know we talked a little bit about health, obviously, and wealth. Obviously, there is a wealth corner. So, what about love?
Oh my gosh, yes. When a person is trying to either improve the relationship that they're in or attract a new one, I want people to look at their southwest sector of their space. It could be the whole home, or it could just be the southwest sector of that individual room, of your bedroom, perhaps. If you have images of single items, like a person with their back to you, you're probably only going to be attracting aloof individuals, someone who's not really willing to connect. You want to make sure that you have pairs of items, and it can be a pair of candles. It could be a pair of chopsticks, for all that matter. But you want to have, like, especially in the ideal world, you want to have an image of a couple that appear to be happy and contented, and together. That is going to be how your brain begins to recognize that, yes, I am worthy of being in a couple. I am worthy of a healthy, safe, supportive relationship.
There we go. That's a great tip. Love it. And so, how can feng shui improve family harmony? I know we talked about your kids. What are some tips you could give us with that?
So the family and ancestors sector is in the east. And earlier we talked about like if your children are arguing, you could put the
Mhm.
pictures together and then wrap a red string around it 9 times. How many times? And, all of that, it matters little as much as you are putting the intention behind, I want to support these family members to find a way to be in harmonious accord, if you will. Um, the I would look at that east sector and see, well, what is going on? Is that where you're having a lot of clutter, or is it too sterile? Sometimes the people's that is where the junk room is, and nobody wants to go in there. That can make the whole family feel a little vacant. And here's another interesting little tip. Um, Bedrooms that are in front of the midline of the house, so they can often feel a little disconnected from the rest of the family. Now, sometimes you don't have a choice as to where all the bedrooms are located, but if you have a child who is struggling more with feeling isolated, with feeling, not really part of the family, make sure their bedroom is behind the midline of the house so they can feel more cozy and included and snuggled in the family unit.
Wonderful. And how can we just use simple techniques in our daily day and life?
The simplest technique, first and foremost, is making sure that you as an individual stay grounded. That can be for a quick walk in the neighborhood, sticking your feet in the dirt. House plants are a wonderful way for you to stay connected with nature. Um, I don't recommend plastic plants because those of course, if you're in a dark room and you need something green, then you can have that. But it's better to have real living plants. So the other thing too that many people they recommend journaling. I wish I was one of those people that could actually journal, but I don't. Um, I should. I'm not going to should myself anyway. But yeah, meditating, taking a few moments to just ground, to breathe, take like 3 deep breaths as you're breathing in potential, breathing out the stress and the overthinking. Do that 3 times, and that will help to get your day started off right. And I recommend doing that before you have your coffee.
Wonderful. So, you've given us so much great advice and, more importantly, educated us. Because I've learned a lot about feng shui today that I did not know, and then also learned a lot of misconceptions about it. I think there's more misconceptions than there is actual knowledge. And to understand how all of this can interact with how you think about things, set up a space, all of those things. So I'm super excited to have learned this. But also, I will say this joy water is amazing, smells amazing, and what an additional benefit this is to be able to have these things. And it also goes back to one of our senses.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us, if we want to hire you, how do we get a hold of you, and how do you purchase more of this?
Absolutely. All right. So if you go to my website, The Intuitive Interior, and again, it's THE, and then the word intuitive, and then the word interior, which is singular. If you go to theintuitiveinterior.com, you will see a list of the resources on how to hire me. If somebody wants to talk to actually have me talk about hire me for a feng shui consultation, it's really best if they send me a request, an email request, because there's a few other pieces of information that I'll need. That's a 4-hour There's 4 hours at least on the front in the home, and then there's some extra time that I have to work up the bagua mat for that space prior to that. So that's not one that people can really book online, but that's okay. They can contact me online. Um, but yeah, so on there you can see the products. I sell this Joy Soak. I also have the same Epsom scents in an Epsom salt soak. So if people are bath takers, they can soak in the joy as well. But yeah, so I have remote consultations available. I have the energy transformation coaching sessions available online, and the space clearing as well. So yeah, there's lots of options to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, I am so thankful to spend time with you today and learn more about Feng Shui and what's really truthful in it, and also to meet you and learn everything that you can do to help people with their spaces. So, Beverly, I know we've talked a lot about homes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and we've talked a little bit about office spaces. How about you tell me a little bit more on why someone would want to hire somebody who is a master in feng shui to come through their office?
Oh gosh, yes, I've worked with several business owners in the past. The f- Usually when someone is hiring me, it's because something is making their hiring practices not as effective. Their employee turnover has gotten to be really high, or they're losing money and they don't know what's going on with that, um, or that there's just been a lot of bickering among the team members. So let me give you a couple of examples. When I was still in the Dallas area, there was an assisted living facility that could not keep a director of nursing for the life of them. And this had been going on for a year and a half, almost 2 years, where they just were cycling through. And that was beginning to impact the residents because, without that consistent leadership, the rest of the staff was also beginning to feel a little unappreciated. So I came through and did the feng shui over the entire facility. There were over 200 rooms, and I went into each of those rooms to do some various feng shui techniques. This one took a little bit longer because, again, you have to really look for a very specific employee. But within 6 months, they finally found a director of nursing, and she stayed, from what I understand, for about a year and a half, which had been only like a couple of months prior to that. So that provided the consistency. The employees, they actually did an employee satisfaction survey after my visit, and the employee satisfaction increased by over 35%. So that was another measurable goal that they had. And most importantly, for the residents, this had been a memory care facility. The term that used was big bangs. So when a resident would go in for one health issue, they would find multiple others. And that big bang rate even decreased by, I think it was like 25% and that was in the month following that visit. They appreciated the results so much that I ended up doing 3 additional of their facilities. And so that was a pretty good result. The other time that, so there's a, excuse me.
Before we go into that one, and I'll edit my question. What did you find out, and how did you fix it? Without necessarily going too deep, but what did you find out, and how did you fix it?
Okay.
To just kind of present the whole like white paper of it.
Okay. So what I found out in the director of nursing's office was that, again, because like I had talked about before, the reason why I invented Joy Water, the chair and the office itself had such turnover that there was now this really negative energetic vortex in there. And the chair itself was extremely just energetically heavy. And so any person who was walking in there immediately felt this pushback of energy. I'll give you this right now, that if anybody has a situation where they maybe inherited a chair and it has some kind of that heavy feeling, you don't have to get rid of it. You can just take it outside if it's not raining, but put a bunch of sea salt on it and wrap it in a plastic bag and let it be outside for a 24-hour cycle, because that way you get the sunlight and the moonlight energy going in. And then they vacuum up the salt and to put it back. And when I went back to follow up in that space, the chair felt like it was brand new. So that was one thing that I did. Another thing is that externally, they had a massive drainage ditch behind them. And when you have, again, this lower energy that's like rolling down, that was draining the energy from the property. So I did use a variety of crystals and minerals that I essentially planted like a grid around the property. And so those were two of the many other techniques that I used, but that at least kind of gives you a bit of an idea of what are some of the things that I will use. In other businesses, I would have gone through and used more of an essential, the essential oil fire cleanses. But because of this facility had a lot of people on oxygen, that's not an option. So I did use a lot of joy water that day.
Beverly, is there any question that we should have asked that we didn't ask that you'd like to talk about?
So one of the other businesses that I really like to work with are hair salons, because hairdressers are the ones that are in actual contact with us. And man or woman, it's a very vulnerable time. You're trusting that somebody with very sharp scissors is not going to stab you, and that they're going to make you look beautiful. They then let loose of all of their emotions and many times their inhibitions and share some very deep personal things to hairdressers. For a time, I had been with another company, and the philanthropy that they supported was specifically to help hairdressers identify signs of domestic violence, because many times these women are going to the hairdressers to cover things up. I have a client in the Austin area, Urban Betty Hair Salons. They now have 3 locations, and they have me on a quarterly rotation where I go through and do the space clearing for each of those 3 locations to make sure that energetically everything stays as neutral and uplifted as possible as people are going through these kind of heavier experiences. So any of these places that are seeing that rapid turnover with that personal of a touch are perfect referrals for me. So if anybody has another hair salon that you would like some help with, and maybe reduce some of your turnover in your stylists, let me know. I'd love to help. Thank you so much for the invitation. This has been a delight, and I am so glad I've gotten to meet both of you guys today.
Thank you.
Thank you.